Hello guys, how's it going? Screwzilla here, I hope you're all well. Today we're going to be doing a video on the Sonderkraftwagen, Sonderkraftfahrzeug, special purpose vehicle 234, or the Puma. Now, I apologise in advance for my awful pronunciation of German words. I tend to be terrible at them. I can speak German, but I'm very bad at it, because it's been a long time since I spoke it at school. So this is a bit of a review on one of the newer vehicles added to the game, the 2342 Puma. Now, the Puma was designed as a light reconnaissance vehicle for the Wehrmacht. Germany played around with the idea of armoured cars for some time due to the fact that these vehicles were not subject to the Treaty of Versailles. And as you can see, it's a very interesting vehicle, 8-wheel drive. It also has 8-wheel steering, which is quite uncommon. But one of the cool things about it is you have two driving positions, front and rear. So we'll get into that a bit more later on, but it's a very unique feature of this vehicle. So let's start the replay off. The 234-2 was one of the early versions of this type of vehicle, based upon the Schwere Panzerwagen, the heavy armoured reconnaissance vehicle, a very similar design. This was a very similar car, although it often had 6 wheels instead of the 8, and it included a 20mm autocannon on it as well, based upon the Flak 30 AAA gun. Although these two vehicles are very similar in appearance, they differ in many areas. The car prior to the Puma had a liquid-cooled petrol engine and generally drove engine first. So as you see here, I'm driving sort of turret first. The earlier versions would drive in the opposite direction. They had the headlights on this section of the vehicle and would drive engine first. So that changed a bit with this variant. As the 8-wheeled version came into production, an updated model was needed, and lessons learnt with Rommel in the desert campaigns of North Africa, the Germans decided that an air-cooled engine was a far better idea due to the lack of suitable water sources in these climates, along with the fact air-cooled engines are easier to work on and have less bits to go wrong on them. They also decided that a diesel engine would be better for it rather than a petrol engine, so they went with the Czechoslovakian Tetra 103 V12 engine for the new car over the V8 petrol engine, which was in the prior version. They also decided to go with the 8-wheel drive design for increased traction. The Puma was designed for the African campaign, but by the time it was being rolled out, the battle was long lost, so it served predominantly on the Western and Eastern Front, where it proved to be a formidable vehicle. This is one of the things I question War Thunder of why they've put it in desert colours, because this vehicle really didn't serve much in the desert. Its predecessor did, but this one didn't. It was designed for it, but it really didn't do much in Africa, which is a bit annoying because it's in desert colours, which means that everybody can see you in pretty much every battle you fight in, because it's very rare you get desert battles. Oh, I've got a bit of a rant there if I keep going. One unique feature that was kept with the 234 from the original was the dual-seated driving positions and the 12-speed gearbox. This provided drive to all 8 wheels, giving this car superior traction. Another interesting feature was all drive wheels also operated as steering wheels too, giving this car extremely good manoeuvrability. It had 6 forward and reverse gears. It meant that this car could travel as fast forward as it did backwards. It also had a very good weight distribution once the 2342 came into action. Prior to this, many drove engine first, as I said before, due to the uneven weight balance. However, once the larger turret with the 50mm gun was installed, it gave a much better weight distribution to the vehicle. Beforehand, it was around about 65-35? Yeah, that sounds right. because of the lighter turret, which meant that the back was very tail happy. If you're into motorsport, you understand that weight distribution is very important. Because of the big heavy engine up here, it was very tail happy at the beginning. But once they added this turret to it, it really made it almost a 50-50 weight distribution, which made it a lot easier to drive. The first series of the 234-1s were produced with the 20mm KWK 38 autocannon with a 7.92 MG34 mounted next to it. It was actually an open turret vehicle. Around 200 of these variants were produced before they were replaced by the much more well-known 232-2. I have a bit of a quote here from Oberst AD Fabian von Ostau about the use of the Puma. The best patrols I had were those with a clean gun. Even worthwhile targets were only reported and not engaged. That is the business of others. A troop leader with a tendency to bang away is useless for the reconnaissance purposes, since he is soon located by the enemy and chased like a rabbit. I report giving the location of enemy tank Liga is of infinity more value than 5 shot up lorries. Basically, the role of the Puma was purely reconnaissance. If you had to fire your gun, you'd done it wrong. The 234-2 series came to life with the VK1602 Leopard turret on board. If you play World of Tanks, you know that tank very well, the little tiny tank that it is, with the 50mm KWK-L60 gun on board, used by the Panzer IIIJs. It could carry 55 rounds. The heavy turret and gun did result in performance losses in overall speed and acceleration, but it did improve the handling a little bit, as I mentioned before. But more importantly, this gave the Puma a gun capable of knocking out more heavily armoured targets. Theoretically, it could take out T-34s and Shermans, although in practice this never really happened. At least from what I can find, the vehicle's role was as a spotter. It was there for reconnaissance purposes, and although it may not have taken out enemy tanks, it did take out enemy vehicles such as trucks and other armoured reconnaissance vehicles, although there are no historical stories of it killing a vehicle similar to a Tiger like the M8 Greyhound. It did have a lot of important roles to play during the war. The vehicle was much beloved by its crews and extremely stealthy. With the diesel engine, it meant that the crews could creep in a low gear at very low RPM, making far less noise, unlike Americans who would just gun it and make as much noise as possible, giving away their positions. This is said by one of its operators. The Puma did see widespread use in Normandy and was sent to engage the enemy. It had minor success attacking enemy infantry, however Allied air support proved to be the vehicle's downfall. Where am I? Lost my place now. Of 26 Pumas operating in the area at the time, only 8 survived. Although the Puma did suffer less losses overall than tanks of the same unit, which started out with 109 at the battles of Normandy and were only left with 20 by the end. After Normandy, after Normandy campaign in the fall of 44, the 2342 was no longer available and was replaced by the more readily available prior model, the 2341s, and the free variant, which led to the end of the Puma's reign as the premier scouting vehicle of the German armed forces. After this, they were mainly used for a more offensive role. The 2343 was an open-topped tank once more, this time with a short-barreled 75mm K51 gun. This was a stopgap measurement and meant for only soft targets, although it was found to have better penetration than the 50mm and had been and may have been for the inspiration for the vehicle that replaced it. It was only produced in short numbers from mid-44 to the end of 1944. The final production of this vehicle was the 2344, which had the 75mm Pak 40 gun installed. This was an attempt to give the Germans a highly mobile tank destroyer, and was similar to that of the Marder, a stopgap vehicle sort of designed out of necessity rather than from the beginning. It was a very lightly armoured vehicle, relatively cheap to make, easy to produce in relatively high numbers. However, the increased weight put serious strain on the chassis and did lead to a drastic loss in performance. And that's really the end of this vehicle's history. It was used as a defensive vehicle to the end of the war, really. It was more of a... It was no longer a scout, it was more used as a tank destroyer, going up, sort of putting in emplacements and the like. So, what is it like in game? Well, the car is fast, mobile and agile, but it does lack armour. It really is ideal for spotting and flanking the enemy. Now, one of the issues this vehicle does have is it's quite high. We'll just go up and park up next to this dead T-34 here, and you can see that it's relatively high profile, even higher than that of the T-34. It also has these massive aerials on board, which really do not help at all. They give away your position. Now, historically they were there because this vehicle's biggest weapon was its radio, but in War Thunder we don't have that option. Spotting is not really a mechanic that's implemented. Now, in a good hold down position, this tank's not too bad, but it still suffers from lack of armour. For instance, I've been trying to get a good video of playing this tank for about 6 hours now, and I'll get a couple of kills in the games, and, you know, it'll be going semi-okay. But generally I'll only get about 1 or 2 kills a game in this thing, and I have to be really careful because it's just so poorly armoured. It just gets absolutely schwacked by anything that gets close to it. Now, the armour does protect you from machine gun fire, but that's about it. If you get hit by anything 20mm or higher, you're going to die pretty quickly. Let's just jump back to the... Wait, we don't want that one. We want that one. To the hangar here, and show you the armour of this car. AAA vehicles are actually your biggest problem in this tank. Also, the fact that the ammunition storage is really in a bad location. So let's just switch to the armour viewer here. You can see that the actual turret is pretty well armoured. You've got 31mm of armour on there. But the trouble is, you will get penetrated through this section here and this section here constantly. And as you can see, your gunner and your loader in the turret will constantly get killed. Now, it is nice that you've got the secondary driver in here, or technically machine gunner. Well, he has no machine gun, so it makes little sense. But I guess game mechanics doesn't call for 2 drivers. But the biggest problem is your ammunition storage, as I say. Because you've got it at the front of the vehicle here, you sort of think, okay, well, it would be good to poke out a little bit with the front. The trouble is any hit taken in this area, you will explode. I had one game, and I got shot through this section here. The shell went through this little bit here, and killed me, because it ammo racked me, because a tiny bit of fragmentation hit one of these shells. The other issue is the shells are just, they're really good, but they don't work very well in game. The PZGR-39 is a decent shell, usually. I have good games with it, but I found with this vehicle, every time I hit anything, I do bugger all. For instance, I hit a Sherman in the side, killed his loader and his commander, and did nothing to his gunner. Oddly, my shell passed through his gunner and just, turned him yellow. But the explosion itself should have done more damage inside, and this is where this vehicle really lacks, is it's really not got a place in War Thunder. Yes, the 50mm gun is decent, but it was never designed for tank hunting. The 75mm variant of this car would make more sense, but the 50mm variant is designed for taking out other armoured cars and the likes. And again, there's the problem there of when you shoot an armoured car. For instance, I went up against the British anti-aircraft car, I could actually look it up now because I've forgotten the name of that, the AC Mark II. I shot it here, killed its driver, but did nothing else to it. Just turned its gun on me, and of course annihilated me. Didn't get the kill because I actually did survive somehow, but it let off about 2 shots with the Acrylion 20mm, and because of the armor penetration value of these shells, they went straight through the turret with no issue at all. So you can't really even hunt AAA vehicles because you don't have that rate of fire. Again, if you had the 20mm gun on this tank, it would be a really good hunter of AAA vehicles, but with the 50mm, it doesn't have that rate of fire. Now, you can have good games in this tank, absolutely, it's brilliant at flanking, but unfortunately, if you go hull down, people spot you because of the antennae. The only way this vehicle would make sense is if there was a better spotting mechanic in the game. And that's really a discussion for another video. Much like artillery that we have already in the game, there needs to be a system that allows these vehicles to have a use, because currently they're kind of pointless. If you could go around the map and spot and mark locations on the map where the enemy are, for instance, you can do that, I know. But if you could actually do it to call an artillery strike, or if you could do it to point out locations, or more scouting, or if you've got experience for spotting, it would make sense. But unfortunately, because there isn't that spotting mechanic in game, it's very hard to get good games in this tank. You'll get 1 or 2 kills, but it is very hard late game. Early game is your best chance of getting kills with this, because you can flank enemy tanks, get into a good position, and occasionally kill a few of them before the AAA come out and slaughter you. All in all, I do really like this vehicle, and I would really love to see more armoured cars in the game, but I think there needs to be a change to the overall mechanic of the game before we can get that. Now, you will have noticed the in-game replay I showed was actually a custom battle. The reason I went for that is because the 3 or 4 hours of gameplay I've had today in this tank have all resulted in either me dying from a single shot after I've managed to get 1 or 2 kills, being schwacked by planes, which this vehicle is really not very strong against. You will die from planes very easily. I've been one shot by about 8 or 10 planes today. Even Hurricanes and the like will just rip you apart with 7.7mm guns, which is just ridiculous for a fully enclosed vehicle. But, well, what are you going to do about it? Every single game I've played today has resulted in spawn camping, and has lasted about 10 minutes, and been really boring. And it's a problem I'm having more and more with ground forces, but again, that's a rant for another video. Overall, this vehicle is great, and it's really fun to play, but it's not something that you're gonna have epic games in usually. You're gonna have some good games in it for sure, But because it's such a high profile vehicle with such poor armour and a gun that really isn't that great, when you're going up against things of a higher tier than you, you're going to struggle a lot. When you're down tiered, it's great. When you're up tiered, it's not fun at all. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and I hope you found it interesting. I really hope you've learnt something from this too. And I will catch you next time. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you again. This is Screezler out. Bye bye.